I wanted to talk about something that I consider hugely important for Bionicle, specifically 2008, because I know what you guys really like on this channel, but also because 2008 is somewhat special to me, not because of the year itself, but because of the characters involved. I grew up with the Toa Mata and the Toa Nuva, and so these characters were very important to me, but of course, seeing what we got in 2008, while new at the time, while novel and having some pretty cool pieces, kind of wore out their welcome really quickly. 2008 was probably the year where I got the closest to just quitting Bionicle, and that's unfortunate. Here's the thing though. I want to show you something in studio. Before I get into that, let me show you a couple of mocks of those Matoran that I showed off in a previous video because, well, I built them. This is not the correct mask that I showed off in that video because that mask did not print successfully, but also, hey, it gives me an excuse to show off this Picari build, or Picari design that I sketched up. Rothanak actually modeled the piece itself, so credit goes out to them for actually making it, but it was based on a sketch that I did, and I really like it. It's not made for a Matoran, it's made for the Toa Onua Mystica build, so I think here it still looks fine. It still looks really cool, but yeah, you get to see that one, but he is not the only one that I built because I built 3, and if you saw my recent post, then you already know that. This one I really like. I love the mask design here. It's quite simple, quite understated in its own design, and very clearly a how this time around, but still carrying over traits from the Mystica how that we saw. This is also a design by Rothanak, although I changed the model slightly to add a fin down the center, and also changed up the shape of the eyes a little bit, the width of the cheek area. Nothing too fancy. Overall, it's his design, but it just looks absolutely superb in my opinion. And last but not least here, I also designed Mazika, but in my world, Mazika is blue because there's no reason he had to be ice. It's just, you know, easy to reuse those parts from Solik, right? But the build here, again, is pretty straightforward. The mask is the main focus, and in this case, again, a Rothanak design, but this time kind of adjusted quite heavily by myself to add not only the goggles around the eyes, a little bit of a line through the face as well, just to kind of break things up a little bit, the triangular sort of shape in the mouth itself, and of course changed up the design overall so I could fit a visor inside of it, which did not end up working because the resin tolerance is just a little too tight for that. That said, though, let's go ahead and hop on over into Studio so I can show this off to you, because if you're familiar with these characters, then you know exactly who these are. These are the Toa Mystica and Fantoka. I'm just going to use those names interchangeably, but the thing is that these characters get kind of a bad rap, and I think rightfully so, honestly. While the Fantoka look pretty reasonably like their Nuba counterparts, not exact, but you can tell the characters they're supposed to be. The Mystica, just like a full-throated complete difference. It's not great in my opinion. I think the characters are fine, but not as the Toa Nuva specifically. And when I look at these characters, I just don't see it. The how is maybe the closest thing that we got to the Nuva version of the mask. That's not saying a whole lot in all honesty, but what's interesting about these characters, ignoring who they are for a moment, is recolors here. On first glance, it doesn't appear that there are that many recolors because, well, it's gray and silver. It's fairly understated color tones, right? And this is also following up a year with a lot of recolors. 2007 had so many recolors and so many vibrant colors too. It was a very welcome change from previous years that were quite dark. So seeing the Fantoka with their bright colors was cool. Then to admittedly go back into the Mystica with the dark colors again and the over-reliance on silver felt less cool. Neat idea, bad execution in my opinion. But here's the thing. If we take a look at all these sets, take a look at their recolors and say, hey, could we have just changed those colors to something else? Here's what I give you. Like, does this not look at least closer to the Toa Nuva? I'm not saying that they're a good representation of these characters. That's not the point. And of course, they're kind of unfinished in some scenarios. Onua does not have a weapon in his hand currently. Gali doesn't have a weapon in her hand currently. That's not the point here, right? But the idea is to just get the characters on the paper at the very least. And this works. The craziest thing about this, though, is that this is not that far off from what we could have had in terms of part budget. I don't know if certain colors are more expensive than others to produce for LEGO. I've heard that, but I've also heard conflicting information on which colors are which. So I'm not going to make any judgment on that. And obviously that stuff changes over the years anyway. But if we look at the actual characters themselves, yeah, there's a lot of recolors here on Pohatu, but there were a lot of recolors on Pohatu Mystica too, or Fantoka rather. So I did a little bit of an experiment. I counted up all of the pieces that were introduced for the Fantoka and the Mystica versus my recolor, my little rehash of them. this looks like a sprawling difference here, because it's not just looking at recolors, but it's looking at every single new piece introduced with these characters. Obviously, the sockets were new for 2008, unfortunately, so those count, but even if we took those out for a moment, just looking at these, there are 147 new parts with the Mystica and Fantoka here. This looks like much more, but it's not. This is 152 pieces, and that includes 5 brand new eye stalk colors, not necessary by any means, but as a nod to the previous characters. A new visor color for Pohatu. If we actually removed that visor color and removed the eye stalk recolors here, we would actually be at less new and recolored parts for 2008, which is insane to think about if we focus just on the new and recolored parts and not the amount at which they appear per set. Then the Mystica get a little bit of a sort of advantage, because in this total here, and I don't know why, but I counted the black socket twice, which I shouldn't have, but the point still stands, right? Same with the dark gray socket here as well. We get 60, I want to say about 60 new pieces in this right here, whereas this one here has 72. So that is substantially more, right? That's 12 more pieces on top of this. But then remember, these sockets suck. So again, if I take out the eye stalk, if I took out the visors, obviously that brings the numbers a bit closer, making it only 6 more molds. But if I remove the sockets here, oh boy, this is where things get fascinating to me, because we go from 62 new parts and recolors here to 64, and that includes again the eye stalk, the visor recolor here. The only sockets that had to be recolored for this are for brown and black, because we never got the short socket in the older not fragile style in black. We never got them at all in tan. We never got the standard old style socket in reddish brown, which this would end up having to be, right? And if we played it smart with our numbers too, because remember, some of these parts would end up coming out in 2009 as well, right? We got a tan leg piece on the Vorok set. We got the tan hips. We got light blue, or medium blue rather, leg piece on the Kina set as well. So you could even just extend the use of those parts further to help further make up for the fact that these parts exist here as well, which could help to actually reduce the cost down the line. It's crazy that we ended up settling on this design, this controversial design, which again, idea-wise is neat. It's cool to have characters that are built primarily around like a silver color scheme, a gray color scheme, maybe a bit less. But then when you look over at the characters we could have gotten, even though they don't fundamentally change, like, yeah, the builds change around. Onua is now the wide character. Pohatu's got the Gali Mystica build. Gali has the Onua Mystica build, and so on. I just think it makes more sense for these characters specifically. This, at least to me, feels like the Toa Nuva. Would it be a good rendition of them? I don't know. That's up to you to decide, honestly. But the characters here themselves, and I'm realizing that Onua is the only one to have black double sockets instead of his secondary color, so we could even reduce the parts count further there, but I digress. The fact that this was an option here and we didn't take it just upsets me to no end. And yeah, with LEGO going out of their way to redesign the socket, giving us 2 brand new molds in 2008 that were unnecessary, because playtesting would have shown that, hey, these sockets we just created, yeah, they suck. They don't solve the problem of the fragile socket we had last year, because that wasn't a design problem in 2007. That was a chemical makeup problem. That was something wrong with the pigment that was used in those lime sockets, and to a lesser degree, the blue sockets from 2007. It wasn't a design flaw, because we had been using them for many years without really having any issues with fragility. Gunmetal sockets, yeah, that was definitely an outlier and should have been addressed. But at the very least, like, we could have kept that old design and just reworked the formula again. Obviously, the reason LEGO didn't do it was because surely that formula was either cheaper or they were using it across other themes, and there's no way they're going to remake their own plastic specifically for Bionicle and nothing else, at least not very often, and not as a carryover piece. But anyway, that's a separate conversation. All told, The Toa Mystica, the Toa Fantoka could have been better. I talk about 2008 as much as I do on this channel because A, it really works with you guys. You guys really seem to resonate with it, and rightfully so. These are the flagship characters from all of Bionicle, in my opinion. They are the ones we were introduced to as kids. Maybe not your first, depending on when you got into Bionicle, but they were important. They were important to get right, and LEGO didn't do it. So we have to call them out wherever we can, because sometimes they make mistakes. And yeah, you gotta let them know, I guess. All right, so that's gonna be it for this one. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think that the Mystica in these colors would have been better or worse? And if not, why? If so, why? If whatever. With all that said, if you'd subscribe, I'd appreciate it. And of course, you can check out the links for Discord, Instagram, and Patreon, all of which are down in the description below. And I look forward to hearing you and having the conversation over there. Take care.